Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I want to talk about whether you should buy an Xbox Series S. This time around, Microsoft decided to release two variants of Xbox. You have the full-fat 12 teraflop Xbox Series X, and then its little brother, the 4 teraflop Xbox Series S, which is the subject of today's video. Now, the Xbox Series S costs a mere $300 or £250 in the UK when compared to the Xbox Series X, which is $500 or in the UK £450. I believe that the significantly lower price point of the Xbox Series S potentially opens up free audiences that may have not otherwise existed if we only had the bigger brother console, and I'd like to go through them in this video. So audience 1 is where the Xbox Series X unfortunately is just out of reach, right? So I remember when I was a lot younger and I was just, living off pocket money from my parents, there was no way I'd be able to buy something like an Xbox Series X on launch because I just wouldn't have the money to do it. I was just a kid, right? And of course, we always have new gamers coming up online wanting to get into console gaming, and maybe a rarity has occurred here where although the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X were just a bit too expensive for their parents to get it for them, maybe now the Xbox Series S offers a much more affordable alternative to get into next gen. Yes, there are some compromises of course, but it's a way to get into next generation gaming that if this model did not exist, just wouldn't be there. And furthermore, we all live in difficult times right now, economically speaking. Plenty of people, just due to the global pandemic situation, have lost their jobs and don't have a ton of money, and gaming is a fantastic way to distract yourself from the hardships of life as it is at the moment. But you need, the ability to afford a console, and the Xbox Series S maybe is something that you can afford without breaking the bank, which allows you to just, really immerse yourselves in these worlds, these gaming experiences, and the Xbox Series X maybe was just too high a price point at the moment. I think for the demographic of the Xbox Series X simply being out of reach is definitely one to consider for the Xbox Series S. There's another audience, and that would be those who want almost like a home media center, something akin to an Apple TV really. So the original idea behind Xbox One was that it was going to be this all-in-one media center that you'd put underneath your TV, and it would allow you to play games, go on Netflix, YouTube. But I remember thinking that the box was way too bulky and the price point was too high for it to justify that position. But funnily enough, with the much lower price point of the Xbox Series S, I almost feel that it becomes viable as a home media center, where it can watch YouTube, play Netflix, and play games occasionally if you want to, or majority of the time, whatever your preference is. And maybe, you're someone who plays on your PC primarily, but you do it at your desk and you have a monitor, and maybe every now and then you think to yourself, I'd like to play these games on my main TV, and you can go through the hassle of unplugging your PC, plugging it into your TV, or you could just get up, walk to your TV, turn on your Xbox, and continue playing via Play Anywhere. So I think it offers a nice option there, where an Xbox Series X would feel a bit overkill, but an Xbox Series S is priced in such a way where I can actually get behind that being a new audience. And audience number 3 is my interesting one, and this is PlayStation 5 fans who are interested in the world of Xbox. So maybe you are primarily invested in PlayStation, that's where all your friends are, that's where your trophy count is, that's where your old library that you want to bring forward onto PlayStation 5 is, but you're curious about Xbox. What's it like to use the Xbox controller? What's Game Pass like? Maybe later on will the Bethesda acquisition yield some interesting exclusive titles that I don't want to be left out of? Well, the Xbox Series X would be quite expensive to buy as well as a PlayStation 5 for many people, but at the much lower price point with the Xbox Series S, maybe it's a bit more appealing to consider it like a companion or an alternative for people who are primarily PlayStation fans but are interested in the world of Xbox. And furthermore, because it's got that smaller profile, if you're trying to put all these consoles underneath your TV, it's going to be easier to put an Xbox Series S and a PlayStation 5 under there than both an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5, which are quite large consoles. So maybe for those curious about both worlds, the Xbox Series S offers a way in for those curious, but not fully willing to commit to the Xbox Series X, shall we say. So those are 3 demographics that I think are fantastic for Xbox Series S. But there are demographics that I think really shouldn't be looking at it as well and should instead be looking at the Xbox Series X. So, first of all, do you own an Xbox One X? If that's true, you really should be upgrading to the Xbox Series X, because in some ways the Xbox Series S isn't even a jump up. In terms of its GPU, it's actually a bit weaker, and so when you're playing backwards compatibility games, you might find that the resolution actually goes up less than it did on the last generation Xbox One X. So if you own an Xbox One X, I would seriously consider not upgrading to this. You will see some benefits, of course, like the SSD and the CPU is going to be increasing, but in terms of the GPU, it's actually a step down, and that feels like a weird thing in my opinion when you're trying to upgrade into next generation. The other group is really anyone who can easily afford an Xbox Series X and is primarily an Xbox gamer. Something that's been pointed out is that if you buy an Xbox Series S and you want to expand the storage, which makes a lot of sense because it's only 512 gigabytes SSD, and that's before accounting for what the OS takes up, you're not going to be able to install many games on there. And because of that, naturally what a lot of people would want to do is expand the storage of the Xbox Series S. But in order to do this, you need to buy Microsoft's proprietary SSDs, but these are so costly to get it up to 1 terabyte that you would actually be spending about the same amount as an Xbox Series X. So you would have now the same storage level, but you would have lost out on the massive GPU increase. So you don't have access to 4K, potentially reduced frame rates, so on and so forth. So because of that, if you can afford an Xbox Series X and you're a core Xbox gamer, it just makes more sense. Outside of some very obscure situations, like maybe your home media center can only fit an Xbox Series S, for example, or maybe if you actually only want to play one game. I do know people who buy consoles and just play 1 or 2 games, maybe FIFA and Call of Duty, and therefore the storage doesn't really matter to them. Maybe if you're in those groups, then go for it, but for the majority of core Xbox gamers, the Series X does make more sense. So those are my thoughts on the Xbox Series S, a fantastic console, but inevitably not for everyone. As always, people, thanks very much for watching and see you next time.